Hello and welcome to the second edition of Tuesday DJ Gig Tips brought to you by Vibo, the music request app. This week I want to talk about the Don't playlist. We've all gotten it at one time or another. Sometimes it's a very long list, sometimes it's a very short list. Sometimes it's just as simple as, hey, you know what, we'd rather not hear country at our event, or hey, we'd rather not hear hip hop at our event. Other times, there are a couple songs that people don't want to hear, and then other times they're huge long lists. I think it's really important to understand why we get don't plays. Now, we could take it at face value, but to dig a little deeper, I think is to have a better understanding of who your client is and what's really going on. I think there are two different types of don't playlists that we get. The one is solicited, and what I mean by that is when you ask the question somehow, maybe it's in your planning forms, maybe you do it verbally, is there anything that you don't want to hear at your event? I've seen forums where it says must play songs and don't play songs. It's just standard. I did an event one time where I didn't get much of anything for must play songs, but for don't play songs, I got a list of 100 tunes. I couldn't believe it. And that's when the red flag went up. I'm like, I need to find out what's going on here. I need to have a meeting with this client and figure out what's going on. So we sat down and I said, what's with the don't playlist? And they laughed and they said, well, I don't know. You asked the question, so we just wrote some stuff down. Like, okay, so you don't have a problem with Baby Got Back or Love Shack? It's like, well, no, not at all. Don't have a problem with that at all. So just don't worry about it. Well, I'm more interested in what you want to hear than what you don't want to hear, and I'll focus on that because I want to make sure that your personality is represented at your wedding. It could go down like that. I remember another time when I got a real extensive don't playlist. And it was tough. It was a lot of the big songs that people wanted to hear at the time, even the contemporary songs that people wanted to hear at the time. And I remember I was working with this bride who had a bridesmaid who was getting married 2 weeks later. And the bride for my first wedding was going to be a bridesmaid at the second wedding. So working with the same group of people, basically. So I did the first event with this extensive, kind of rigid don't playlist, and it worked out. It was a little tough to make sure I wasn't playing songs that were popular, but I made it happen. 2 weeks later, I do the bridesmaid's wedding where she's the bride and the first bride was the bridesmaid at this one. And oddly enough, I played all of the stuff that was on the don't playlist for the first wedding. And guess who danced? The bride from the first wedding. Danced her ass off. And I asked her, I said, what's going on here? I'm playing all these songs that you didn't want to hear at your event. She said, yeah, I don't dislike these songs. I just wanted something different. Hey, I mean, that's valid. And maybe sometimes that's what these don't playlists are really suggesting. Give me something different than I've heard at every wedding that I've been to for the past 5 years. Maybe that's what they mean. I mean, consider that, a lot of the times the people we're working with are average music connoisseurs. They're not music geeks like me or you, perhaps. They just want something different, and I totally get that. There are other times when the songs on the don't playlist will provoke some type of negative reaction from someone, like the bride or the groom. I remember I did this wedding one time, and I asked the question, hey, I know this is your second marriage. Is there anything that you don't want me to play here that maybe you heard at your first wedding that might bring back a bad memory or something? And I remember the bride, who I knew very well, said, yeah, Aerosmith, Don't Want to Miss a Thing. That was my first husband's tune. That was our first dance. I would rather not hear that at my second wedding. I'm going to leave that in the past. Completely legitimate. The punchline is, I was playing Vitamin String Quartet for dinner and just threw a bunch of tracks on. And one of them was Aerosmith, Don't Want to Miss a Thing. And she said something, and I felt like a heel. You got to pay attention to those don't playlists, especially when those songs are something that's going to provoke a negative emotion. She didn't get mad at me, but it was a screw up on my part, and it just kind of reminded me, hey, if there are don't plays and there's a reason for these don't plays, make sure you don't play them. There have been times where I've gotten pretty long don't play lists of songs that I think you and I would both consider standards for weddings. Just songs that are middle of the road. They're good for anybody who's there, grandma, grandpa, niece, nephew. Everybody can kind of deal with them. Family friendly stuff. So, well, why do I have all these family friendly songs on the list? So I'll ask the question, hey, what if somebody requests some of these songs? What do I tell them? And most of the time, my clients will say things like, oh, well, if someone requests them, by all means, play them. We just didn't want you to play them by default. That makes sense too. If you're the DJ who automatically plays the electric slide a half hour into your performance, you're not alone. A lot of DJs do that kind of stuff. It's a good party starter, but maybe this particular client would rather you not do that and would rather you do something else. But if Aunt Betty from Kalamazoo really wants to hear the electric slide, who are we to tell her no? I've also had clients who have said, you know, if anybody wants to hear anything off of that don't playlist, you send them to me and I'll deal with them. Cool, no problem. And when that happens, I mean, either those songs don't get played at all, or the bride or groom will come up and say, you know what, go ahead and play that song for them. That's fine. So, yeah, digging deeper into these don't playlists, I think, is probably a good idea to ask some questions about them. And I would warn against soliciting too many don't plays because you're just baiting your client at that point. I would ask, of course, if there's anything that's going to provoke a negative emotion, because I don't want that, but I also really don't want anybody to sabotage their own event by putting some really good songs on a don't playlist that would work really well for the crowd that's there. I mean, we know better usually than the client does when it comes to what's going to work for an audience. So in closing, I will say that as important as the don't playlist can be, I think the must playlist is so much more important, and you don't need a list of 50 songs for this. I strongly believe that we need an idea of what the client's personality is so we can make it a part of the event. Now, I had one last weekend where they were like, hey, do whatever you want, just avoid twerky music. Don't play Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion and things like that. That was fair. But it opened up almost too wide of a gap where I didn't know what to play half the time. It would have been nice if they would have told me, you know, we really like early 2000s hip hop, and we really like country, and we really like party tunes. I had to kind of pull it out of them because they weren't volunteering that. They knew what they didn't want, but they weren't sure what they wanted. And it's so important, I feel, to make sure that the client's personality is a big part of the event. So that's it. What do you think? Let us know in the comment section. How do you treat the don't playlist? That's how I try to look at it. I ask questions because it's not always as cut and dry as it looks. But when in doubt, just take it at face value and don't play those songs. That's it. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much for watching. I appreciate you. Practice and enjoy.